All right, everybody. Welcome back to another Monday. And it says we're live, but you know the drill. We need to know if you can hear me and if you can see me. So please let me know in the chat if either one of those things are available right now. Look, we have a lot to talk about, and we'll just go ahead and say that this conversation is going to revolve around some obvious things as well as some thought processes related to what's happening, because we need to discuss that from a speculative point of view as well as get some ideas of how to game plan for what's coming. Because the reason I titled this live stream the way I did is that there are the aerial threats happening right now. We see a call to arms occurring all over the world when it comes to military preparations regarding a global conflict. And the worst case scenario isn't exactly what a lot of people would immediately think, because I'm sure people saw the thumbnail, saw the title, and they're like, oh boy, here we go. Magic Prepper is starting to lose it and fall off the deep end, right? But in reality, what I wanted to discuss was the idea that the worst case scenario is actually kind of like the opposite of what a lot of people are leaning towards when it comes to a lot of these events right now. So we're going to discuss all of that tonight. I appreciate every single one of you being here. 5x5 flying in through the chat. So thank you all so much for that. John Galt, I appreciate the super chat. Thank you for that. Let's see here. South Florida DCL. Yes, ID4 is the best. So I'm glad you mentioned that quote, because I was thinking that myself when South Carolina was like, don't shoot at it, right? All right. So thank you all so much for being here. And yeah, I see Desert 1776 checking in from Scottsdale, Arizona. Good to see you. Oki Khan, Mad Mama is here. Bees Nuts is here as well. And yeah, I just say the names. Don't worry about it, okay? Oh, Joel Silva, good to see you as well. So a lot of things going on, and these are things we need to discuss. And so we'll kind of walk this in a series of events, and that way you can kind of get my full perspective as to what's happening and why I think a worst case scenario situation might be actually unfolding before our eyes, but not like nuclear Armageddon. That's not what I'm considering the worst case scenario at this point in time. And this is just due to my interpretation as to all the events that are occurring right now and just how I'm kind of reading the writing on the wall and saying, I think there's reason to believe that things are worse than what we're anticipating because of the not lack of transparency, but the fact that there may be no need for transparency. Okay. Now, let's just jump right into it, because we're here to have a good time. And I know I'm going to have a good time, and I hope all of you do too. And if you're here on the replay, thanks for coming back and checking it out. And I appreciate you as well. I might not be able to say your name in the live stream, but I'm just going to say that you're here with us all. All right. So Air Force fires unarmed ICBM in Pacific Ocean with aim toward deterrence. This happened on February. Well, actually, it happened on February 9th, but this was reported on February 11th. And an ICBM was launched from California into waters 4,200 miles away near the Marshall Islands, which, if you're unaware, the Marshall Islands is where a lot of nuclear testing took place way back in the day when all of that was still the norm, and likely beneficial in the sense of assuring that MAD was still the global policy, but of course terrible for the environment. So however you want to take that, it is what it is. The launch of a Minuteman III by a team from the Air Force Global Strike Command at Vandenberg Space Force Base was routine and not the result of current world events, the Air Force said Friday in a news release. Which, of course, it's always routine, and they always have these things scheduled, and I totally understand that. But you have to keep in mind that when we're talking about what's going on in the world right now, anything that's escalatory or even defensive in posture has to be considered contextually with the timing of it, right? And the timing of this scenario was right after North Korea had a giant parade showing off all their nuclear warheads and all their nuclear capabilities, as well as China's spy balloon being shot down just a day or two before. So listen, these things have relevance regardless of what is being reported. We know that, but we also have to understand that, yes, these tests are scheduled far in advance, and so there is still the possibility that these things were just on the docket, but I think they hold more significance now, even if they were right on time the way they were meant to be in the sense of an agenda. The significance is still there, and still maybe is seen from a different point of view by our adversaries, right? So these are all things we have to keep in mind based on the context of where we're operating at right this second, all right? The Air Force has conducted more than 300 such tests, most recently in September. And I think we all remember when that happened as well, okay? And according to the Air Force, this was when they were just trying to test out the re-entry vehicle of the ICBM for it to re-enter our atmosphere, get back in there and, hit the target the way that they want it to. So either way, this happened, and we should be aware of that. And of course, here we go. The Minuteman III missile is slated to be replaced by the LGM-35 Sentinel missile beginning in 2029. Hopefully that's soon enough. We'll see, I guess. What would be really easy to do is to replace the Minuteman III missiles once they're already launched, because then you want to have that giant missile in the way to have to deal with, right? Anyway, sorry if I'm slightly cynical, because the Sentinels would eventually replace all Minuteman III missiles, which are stationed in North Dakota, where I am located, Wyoming, Montana, Nebraska, and Colorado. And like I said previously, there are no fallout shelters that are like easily or publicly accessible here in North Dakota right now, or at least in my region. Okay. And there might be some in some of the larger cities, but when I talked to my municipality and asked if there was operating or even an existing fallout shelter, they had to have me restate the question, because I don't think they were really considering why I would be asking it or what the purpose of that would even be. Right. And I just find that interesting, because it's not very far for me to literally drive straight down a road and run right into a missile silo. Like, they're right on the side of the road. It's not some hidden thing that's camouflaged or anything like that. Like, it's just there. And there's generally, on some days, you'll see like a Humvee with a 50 cal on top chilling outside. Like, these are very obvious things. So I'm just throwing it out there. Not too much in the infrastructure for us to hide from this stuff. So we're on our own, which is why we should all be investing in what we can to protect ourselves from these possible threats. Okay. And that includes not just nuclear, but of course, the threat of an EMP or the threat of biological, who knows, right? Okay, so moving on from there. And let me just jump back in the chat here for a second to make sure we're all still good to go. And of course, everyone's mentioning that there is currently like an active shooter situation happening at Michigan University. So that's something that we can keep an eye on. But I do believe that is, occurring right this second. So there's not much to report on until we're made aware of what occurrences are happening there, right? But obviously another tragedy that we don't need to have right now, because things are very bad. We don't need these things happening domestically when we're already having these issues around the world, okay? So we're kind of going through this first week in the aerial threats of what happened over this past 7 days, because it's been kind of ridiculous, but this is more of a reminder and part of the equation for the eventual outcome we're going to get to in the sense of worst case scenario. So I want to make sure we discuss that, but here we go. All right, so we're going to do this like in a timeline. So this is like the series of events, okay? So this one came out on February 10th, but this was about the original Chinese spy balloon. So keep in mind, I believe that was February 4th when that was originally downed. And the reconnaissance platform has been located. So that means that like the payload / the reconnaissance platform that was doing all the data gathering has been recovered supposedly. Okay, so that's where we are in the sense of trying to find out exactly what was on board and what it was capable of. U.S. officials said Friday the undercarriage of the Chinese spy balloon shot down Saturday, where the surveillance equipment and other technology was housed, has been located in waters off South Carolina. The official told ABC News chief global affairs correspondent Martha Raddatz it was found Thursday and is largely intact. So that should tell us that if there is information or there are any types of explosives, which was something that was considered a possibility but has not necessarily been verified yet, we'll at least get that information relatively soon, possibly, or never at all, because this could all end up being very classified based on whatever it is that they actually had on that thing. And of course, any report we do get from it should be looked at with a grain of salt, understanding that they might decide to leave some details out of the report based on how high the threat level might have actually been, okay? So just keep that in mind. That's where we're at in the sense of the recovery of the Chinese spy balloon that was shot down, okay? Now, moving on from there, we jump into what happened after that. Like I said, we're doing this chronologically or chronologically to the best of my ability, because I might make a mistake. So we'll see what happens, right? All right. So China claims second suspected spy balloon over Latin America was also lost. All right. So this was reported February 7th. So we did the first balloon that was shot down off the coast. Now we're talking about the other balloon that was reported to be seen over Latin America that is just also lost. Okay. Chinese officials have admitted to owning the second spy balloon spotted over Latin America, which they claim was also blown off course. And, the spokeswoman Mao Ning said that on Monday that the balloon over Latin America was in an unmanned search airship that had its course derailed by the weather, okay? And who would have ever expected an airship to have its course derailed by the weather? It's like something you wouldn't necessarily plan for. Like to throw a balloon up in the sky at a very high altitude and then have no anticipation that it might get blown off course. And in fact, multiple balloons might get blown off course and end up in airspace where they probably wouldn't be welcome. But I can't believe that this is happening. So just keep in mind that that second balloon was a thing, and it was reported and actually claimed by the Chinese as being another civilian airship, aka not just a balloon, a maneuverable airship, and yet I don't have an update on that particular balloon. So maybe I missed it, but if you guys know anything about that balloon in particular, like where it ended up or if it's been shot down or anything like that, like let me know in the chat, because it's something that I don't have the information on right this second. Okay. Let's see here. I'm checking in on the chat real quick. The Watchman has a lot going on, apparently. The Ohio train accident will be discussed tonight, I promise. But I'm just trying to cover all the bases, and that is a big deal. And it's obviously a domestic issue. I am trying to tie everything in based on timing and also region, okay? Because we're going to have a lot of jumping around until we get to that eventual story. But that's a big story, and that's something we should at least keep in mind, because if you needed a reminder for why having CBRN protection isn't always just about all-out nuclear war, this well, who knows? Maybe the Chinese train derailment in Ohio is something that can remind you that this is something that could occur regardless of where we are in the world, right? An accident can happen, and accidents happen frequently when it comes to toxic chemicals. And here we are witnessing it right this second. So just keep those things in mind, because it's not always about nuclear war when you get a gas mask and a hazmat suit. Sometimes it's just about a train having a crash, right? Okay, so Andy on Guam, 4 recent train derailments. Yes, that's true. There are some things we should consider regarding that, because they happen a lot more often than some of us might think. And a derailment doesn't always mean like a full-on accident, but we are going to discuss that, I promise. So thanks for bringing that up, Andy. All right, now let's jump into the next part of the aerial threat saga, which is what we can coin it as if you'd like, because I think that's a good way to say it. All right, so what happened next? Well, the U.S. jet shoots down unknown object flying off Alaska coast. So we had the Alaska incident, right? U.S. military fighter jet shot down an unknown object flying off the remote northern coast of Alaska on Friday on orders from President Joe Biden, White House officials said. White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said the object was down because it was flying at about 40,000 feet, reasonable threat to civilian flights. All that stuff we know, but this is just a reminder as to what all just occurred this past week. And we don't understand that as of right now, it's still speculatory that this was like a balloon. All we know is that it was like a metallic cylinder-shaped object that was just floating in position. It may or may not have had a payload. I've seen that report, but a lot of this is unverified currently, and the wreckage or the recovery process of that wreckage hasn't necessarily been overly reported on either. So we're still learning a lot about what these things are, but this is something that also just happened, right? This is quite an anomaly, because when I made the video last week about, hey, this has happened twice now, and this is getting kind of crazy, right? It had only happened twice now, and now it has happened more than twice, and it's starting to get a little crazier. And obviously, do I think this could be a distraction? Of course I do. But we're going to talk about that a little bit later, I promise, because there are things we need to discuss regarding this whole situation, okay? All right, so what happened then next? Well, next we shot down an unidentified cylindrical object over Canada. Okay, US F-22 fighter jet shot down an unidentified cylindrical object over Canada on Saturday, the second such instance, and as many days as North America appeared on edge following a week-long Chinese spying balloon saga that drew the global spotlight. Okay. Also, the U.S. military scrambled fighter jets in Montana to investigate a radar anomaly that triggered a brief federal closure of airspace, which we now know wasn't just an anomaly, but that's according to this story. Now, this story came out on February 12th. So you can see here, we're going chronologically through these because we need to really just understand where we stand in the sense of these aerial threats, okay? Those aircraft did not identify any object to correlate the radar hits, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, said in a statement. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau first announced Saturday's shootdown over the northern Yukon Territory, which is where it happened, saying Canadian forces will recover and analyze the wreckage. Yet that's another amount of wreckage that I don't know much about the recovery process on, or have not heard any verified claims as to what exactly it was, other than that it was some kind of, likely a balloon with some kind of a payload, okay? So either way, this is what we're being told. This is not necessarily what I'm saying is true or exactly correct, but it's just what we're being told right now, because this could all change very quickly, we all know. All right, and then what happened? And I feel like we're watching Dude, Where's My Car right now. Like, and then, because it just keeps going, U.S. shoots down mysterious object near Canadian border, and that happened on February 13th, okay? Or that's when this was reported, and it actually happened on the 12th, all right? U.S. military fighter jets on Sunday shot down an octagonal object over Lake Huron, the Pentagon said, the latest incident since a suspected Chinese surveillance balloon put North American security forces on high alert. Now, This happened, okay? And I want everyone to understand that this was just another object in our airspace that was shot down over Lake Huron, right? And the weirdest part is, or Huron, sorry, I don't know why I suddenly became a Spanish speaker. But what I want to mention is, these things happen very quickly. And one of the proclamations, we'll just call it, from the Defense Department as to why these things are happening so frequently suddenly is that, they went and they changed their filtration process on how they scan and how they interpret radar data to try to make sure that they had all their bases covered. And when they changed those parameters, suddenly they saw these objects that they had never seen before. So listen, like, to me, that's the equivalent of going on like Flight Tracker and turning on the military filtration one and then being like, oh wait, all these are military aircraft. I can't believe it, right? So just keep that in mind, because that's the official story right now, is that's why this is happening. Okay. And we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. And here's the thing, and this is all adding up to that eventuality of the conversation, but that is the official story. But that actually might be true, which should really concern you. Okay. Because, it's like some guy in the tech room was sitting at the radar and was like, what if I just like turn this button on? Oh crap, there's a lot of stuff suddenly, right? So either way, this object was shot down over Lake Huron. Okay. Let's see here. U.S. Air Force General Glenn Van Herk, who is tasked with safeguarding U.S. airspace, told reporters that the military has not been able to identify what the three most recent objects are, how they stay aloft, or where they are coming from. We're calling them objects, not balloons, for a reason, Van Herk, head of the North American Aerospace Defense Command and Northern Command, said. Now, I am aware that I believe it was Senator Chuck Schumer is one who said that they believed they were balloons. We also have reports that different representatives from Montana were told that certain objects were of a certain nature, whereas they also let us know that NORAD was actually giving conflicting reports as to what they were being told. So there's a lot of confusion happening as well. Okay, let's see. I'll let the intel community and the counterintelligence community figure that out, he said. So they're waiting for the CIA and the FBI to come in and tell everybody what the official story will actually be, which, will be whatever it is, I guess. Okay. Though it did not pose a military threat, I guess it didn't, right? It did not pose a military threat. The object could have potentially interfered with domestic air traffic. It was traveling at 20,000 feet, and it might have had surveillance capabilities. So somehow a randomized object at 20,000 feet with possible surveillance capabilities isn't a military threat. It's only possibly interfering with domestic air travel, right? But even so, because it's messing with domestic air travel, we're going to blow it out of the sky with an F-22, right? And shoot a missile at it. Okay. I guess that's the best course of action for dealing with, domestic air travel threats. Okay. Now, we did all this. Everything's great. Let's go ahead and review all the little events we just discussed in a nice little map of what happened, so we can just kind of look at that together. Okay. So we have February 10th, car-sized object shot down over ice near Dead Horse, Alaska. February 11th, unidentified object shot down over central Yukon. February 12th, U.S. fighter jets shoot down object over Lake Huron. And then way back on the 4th is when we had the original balloon situation, which supposedly made, the Department of Defense say, maybe we should turn on more filters or parameters for our radars. And then, oh my goodness, look at these other things that are there now. So either way, this is the events that we just went through in the sense of aerial threats. Any one of these aerial objects could have had a much more nefarious mission and could have been filled with who knows what. And these are the things that we need to consider as preppers, because what's the most likely thing? Well, one thing that has been mentioned quite a bit is EMP. And although I think the EMP threat is becoming more and more of a realized threat, I do think that these objects are at too low of altitude for an EMP to be as effective as you would expect it to be. So if you were going to EMP a country like the United States, you would probably want it to be as effective as possible. And in general, at least from my basic understanding of how EMPs work, or at least HEMPs that would be let off from a nuclear device detonating in the high altitude regions, basically the higher you go, or at least to a certain degree, the more coverage you'll have. And a lot of these devices were very close to the ground in consideration when it came to trying to use that type of a device. So just my thought process on it, unlikely that these would be an EMP in that sense, but you can't rule it out, because there's something else you want to consider here. And the way this map looks, I just want everyone to kind of take a look at it really quick. But notice how these are all kind of in a line. And of course, these things are, if they're balloon in nature, they're drifting, from west to east, just based on the jet stream and stuff like that. But basically, you almost have like a line of sight or like a chain of command here. And this could be like a chain reaction type situation as well, right? Where it's not just one device getting it all done in one shot. If you have everything structured in just a certain way, maybe a network of these objects is how you create the desired effect, right? And the other things we have to consider is the idea that these could easily have some type of a biological threat, which is unlikely in the sense of just dispersing it, but maybe if it has a way of delivering things towards the ground. And then you also have the threat of even just disruptions, because if you cast a wide enough net and you're able to create some kind of electromagnetic disruption, imagine how communications would go. And if communications go down, I mean, yeah, we might still have power, but communications are a pretty big deal when it comes to everybody understanding what's happening. So all these things have a different level of reality to them, but we just don't know. So there's a lot of things as preppers that we should consider, but we can't necessarily put our finger on it right this second. Okay. And the other thing I want everyone to keep in mind, and this kind of will go into our final wrap up of this conversation at some point here, but this just came out. U.S. military's first shot at unknown octagonal object over Lake Huron missed. Okay. The second missile took it down. All right. But U.S. military jet that downed an unknown object in the Michigan sky on Sunday missed on its first attempt over Lake Huron. Air Force F-16 jet was using Sidewinder missiles to attack the target. The first Sidewinder heat-seeking missile missed the target. Okay. So I don't know if these things have countermeasures. I don't know if maybe they have kind of like some sort of heat signature or IR shielding or something like that in order to be more evasive. Or it's possible that we just straight up missed. And, these are things that can happen. I'm sure I'm not an Air Force pilot or anything like that, but I would just say that we should all be very aware of the fact that even the best of the best in, high quality equipment can just miss. And with a heat-seeking missile. So there's that. All right. So Rebecca Snavely says, not an alien craft makes zero sense. And you know what? I'm leaning towards not alien, right? But we're going to discuss more of that here in just a second, I promise. There's a couple other things we have to talk about in the aerial threat department, and then we'll move into that territory, I promise you. So let's just go ahead and start moving in towards that territory by talking about some of the other objects that are in the sky. Because, yes, apparently there's more objects. So we got to just keep going, apparently. China says it's preparing to shoot down unidentified flying object near Yellow Sea. Okay, this happened on February 12th. All right, so 2 days ago. Authorities in China are preparing to shoot down an unidentified flying object currently over Shandong province, according to Chinese state media. While it's not immediately clear who the flying object might belong to, every country is now looking at the skies with more skepticism ever since the U.S. military shot down a Chinese spy balloon a little over a week ago. Local maritime authorities in East China's Shandong province announced on Sunday that they had spotted an unidentified flying object in waters near the coastal city of Rizal in the province, where we're preparing to shoot it down. Reminding fishermen to be safe via messages. All right. So China is now claiming to have the same problem. All right. So is that just a sleight of hand to say, look, well, it's happening to us too. So clearly it's not us being nefarious towards you all. Yeah, that first airship was ours. We claim it, but we don't know anything about these other ones. Right. And what do we phone China and say, hey, turn off some of those filters on those radars because you wouldn't believe some of the stuff in the sky. Like, it's very coincidental, but it might also be legitimate. I don't know. I literally can't verify these things necessarily, but I can speculate about their origin. And if I wanted to shed some of my liability, it would be easier to do if I was to claim to be the same level of victim, right? So sounds like it's out of a political playbook of some sort. Not that I am aware of any of those things. All right. Also, this is new as well. China accuses U.S. of flying over 10 balloons over its airspace. Washington issues swift denial to Beijing's allegation, which widens row that began after U.S. military last week shot down what it says was a Chinese spy balloon. Okay, this is coming from Al Jazeera. And China's accused the United States of flying high-altitude balloons over its territory without permission more than 10 times in the past year, prompting a denial from the U.S. government. So, are we also flying balloons? Is everybody flying balloons? Are balloons just all over the place all the time and we just didn't know about it until now? I have no idea. But all I'm saying is that we either have a mutual balloon issue when it comes to, invading other people's airspace, or we're using excuses now as to why you had a balloon over your sky and now I had a balloon over my sky. See, and it's not really a big deal because we all got balloons and it's happening to us all, so you can't really get mad, right? Either way, this is just what's being reported. And the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said it is also common for U.S. balloons to illegally enter the airspace of other countries. Okay, and you know what? I'm not going to even argue that because I'm sure we are regularly in the airspace of other countries. If you don't believe me, ask Russia from back in the 1960s when they shot down that U-2 spy plane. Either way, these things happen, and it's all just part of the surveillance state and the intelligence community trying to get as much intel as they can. So I don't doubt that these things happen, but this is kind of an interesting accusal, not to mention probably a deference or a placement of blame in order to hide any, I don't know, liability of owning the other airships. It might be, it might not be. Either way, because of all this, everybody's freaking out, right? Oh, hold on a second. I just shot myself in the foot here. Not for real. I didn't actually do that, I promise. But we do have other countries jumping into the mix now because they're concerned, which I understand. Okay, so here we have Brit warplanes on standby to shoot down Chinese spy balloons 24/7, says the Prime Minister. Okay, Prime Minister refused to say whether any incidents had been reported in UK airspace, but said the UK is protected by a quick reaction alert force. The UK has Typhoon fighter jets on call 24/7 to tackle the threat of spy balloons. But the Prime Minister declined to say if any such devices have been detected in UK airspace after Transport Minister Richard Holden said it was possible. All right, so just wanted to mention that really quickly because basically everybody's now watching the sky. Everybody's worried about these balloons, and there's a lot of reasons to be concerned about it. We have to be realistic. Regardless of origin and regardless of purpose, the likelihood of these balloons being a positive thing is very low, right? We know that there's more of a likelihood that they're nefarious in nature and that they would probably be used against us in some way, shape, or form. So that's what we have to be concerned about right this second when it comes to all these things occurring. The Fox a lot is also mentioning the active shooter situation at Michigan State. And yes, we are monitoring that as well. But we don't know a lot about it yet. So we're going to kind of wait till more details come out. Okay. Currently, all I'm seeing on the headlines is multiple injuries reported, university on lockdown after shots fired, and suspect is on the loose. So, and just keep in mind, and I'm not trying to say anything is not important or anything like that, but just keep in mind that a lot of these shootings that occur on schools and in campuses and stuff, sometimes they're criminal in nature, sometimes they're gang related. There's a lot of stuff that can happen, and sometimes yes, they're a psychotic person that we don't need to have in our midst anymore. But either way, we got to keep an eye on it until we find out afterward exactly what's going on. Just because right now there's not much to report. Okay, so. Either way, we're having a lot of interesting things going. So, well, what else is going on? We know what's going on overseas, and there's a lot of things happening there, and I think that we have to discuss that. And I want to make sure we're all on the same page and ready to do so. Give me 1 second. I am going to drink a little bit of coffee because clearly I'm not amped up enough. Okay. I feel much better now. All right. So, and I do want to mention, thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Monday nights is when we do this, and it's great to go back and kind of report on everything that happened from the week before and talk about what to expect moving forward. And that way, as preppers, we can just be more ready and have more anticipation for what to expect moving forward, because that's kind of how you have to strategize. Strategy isn't about knowing every single detail. Sometimes you have to speculate and build that strategy based on the most likely scenario or the most possible outcomes, right? So that's what we're trying to do right now. Okay, and then John Doe just mentioned the lasers over Hawaii. That is also something that occurred that I didn't mention, but yes, that is something that did happen as well and caused some alarm. And I mean, it's just like one example after the next. We can find more and more examples of weird aerial activity the longer this goes on. And I honestly believe we're going to see more and more of it. And I don't think it's because we turned off certain radar settings. Now, do you? I don't think so. Okay. All right. Oh, and real quick, I do need to mention that Midway USA is the biggest sponsor of the channel. I appreciate them for doing what they do for me over here. They're just trying their best to support someone in the preparedness community, and for some reason, they chose me. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the fact that the preparedness community is becoming more acknowledged as a reasonable community, because we are. And obviously, like, what we're doing is the most reasonable thing to do. Prepare. And you should be prepping as best you can. And also, if you guys want to check out any exclusive content or anything like that, make sure you go to the subscribe star. It's $5 a month, but I'm going to be putting weird stuff over there, as well as having preparedness incentives for those of you who will receive things that are worth more than that $5. I think that'll be worth it for you. And I also think that I might have some cool, like, members only kind of, let's just call it swag, coming very soon. So that's going to be very cool. So I just put that link in the chat for everybody. Harvard Prepper. Meanwhile, as everyone watches balloons, the count of Chinese nationals coming over the southern border is up 800%. Yes, and that is something to consider. And we can talk about the southern border ad nauseum, right? But what I want to say about it is that it's not just the Chinese nationals that we have to be concerned about there. We know the criminal element and the violent element of the cartels is constantly an issue on the southern border. And you'd be surprised with how embedded they are within our country and how well financed and well armed they are and what kind of foreign connections they actually have. So there's reason to believe that there's already a standing army right here in the United States anyway. But that's for another video, okay? So, Minuteman69, no discount code or anything like that. It's just a partnership. So, but maybe that's something we can do in the future. I'll let you know. I'll work on that for you. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and talk about other things happening that are, I'm going to say concerning, but things we have to pay attention to, because this could be kind of like a indicator, right? Okay. Stoltenberg, Ukraine using more ammo than NATO is providing. Right? Ukraine's military is consuming more ammunition than Western countries are providing. Almost a year after Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered the invasion, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said Monday. In a briefing ahead of this week's meeting of NATO defense ministers in Brussels, Mr. Stoltenberg said key capabilities such as ammunition, fuel, and spare parts must reach Ukraine before Russia can seize the initiative on the battlefield. So understand, it is clear that we are in a race of logistics. Oh, you mean you're at war and logistics is a big deal? Oh, okay. The war in Ukraine is consuming an enormous amount of munitions and depleting Allied stockpiles. Well, that's good to hear. So they're consuming tons of ammunition over there, which I understand. To defend your country from a major superpower, you probably need to spend a lot of ammunition. And depleting Allied stockpiles is the part that I'm concerned about. So there's a few things you need to consider here. First off, they're depleting Allied stockpiles, aka the people who are supposed to group together to defend from, existential threats are depleting their ability to do so. And then down here, it also says, he said the waiting time for large caliber ammunition, such as shells to the 155 millimeter howitzer sent by the U.S., has increased from 12 to 28 months on average. So now we're getting to about 2 years behind on production when it comes to having the munitions required to fight a war. That's not a good sign. And I know that our adversaries are watching this, right? And saying, okay, they're 2 years behind now. How many years would it take for us to actually defeat America in an open war? Okay, about 6 years, you think? All right, so let's just push this thing a little bit longer, see how much more we can deplete before we actually pull the trigger, right? That's just speculation or just a thought exercise, but that's just something I wanted to say in regards to why that's a concerning situation. Also, expect this to crunch on the civilian ammunition market, because there is the possibility of the Defense Authorization Act being implemented to say, okay, all ammunition that is currently being produced has to go to the conflict zone or be acquired by the military because we're so behind. So unfortunately, civilians, you will be allocated whatever's left over. Right. And that could be a problem. So just keep that in mind. I'm not saying that it's guaranteed to be an issue, but as of right now, that's where my mind goes, because I've been burned by ammo shortages in the past, as we all have. So we definitely like to keep that front and center, right? We want to stay ahead of that instead of wait till after and then go, well, I wish I would have got more. Well, I told you should have, right? Okay. Let's see here. All right. I am going to see what else anybody's putting in the chat real quick. Florida Prepper, NORAD actually fixing to do a drill coming up soon. Yes, and honestly, I'm aware that there's like a NORAD drill showing up sometime soon, I believe in Valdorf or around Washington, D.C. or something along those lines. Yeah, and drills sometimes are more than drills. We know that from experience, right? So just be aware, keep an eye on that. But you have to expect these types of things to be happening right now because we are on the edge of entering this global war officially. We're already doing it by proxy. We're already doing all the shady stuff. I guarantee you that. But publicly, it's happening sooner than I'd like. Okay. Now, what else is happening over there in Eastern Europe? Okay, well, we have to at least keep an eye on it. So Russia is amassing 1,800 tanks and 700 aircraft for a new Ukraine assault. Okay, they have 700 aircraft, 1,800 tanks, and 500,000 men for a new assault on Ukraine, which will start in just 10 days. They have said. I believe we might be near that 10-day mark at this point, but I don't know for sure. All I'm trying to say is that there's a good chance that we're going to see a lot more action here very soon. Ukraine has stated that Russian President Vladimir Putin is stocking up on weapons and ammunition in preparation for a massive new offensive in the coming weeks, right? So this is all moving forward. As much as maybe we don't want it to, it seems to be moving that way. In what is being called a zero-day assault plan, Russia has reportedly massed hundreds of thousands of soldiers, thousands of tanks, and hundreds of warplanes for the invasion on already heavily war-torn Ukraine. Okay, a huge onslaught is on its way. So we need to be aware of that. Now, Russia is also pushing the envelope, and they're pushing the envelope by encroaching on NATO territory. Dutch F-35s intercept 3 Russian military craft over Poland, Netherlands Defense Ministry, okay? 2 Dutch F-35 fighters intercepted a formation of 3 Russian military aircraft over Poland and escorted them out, the Netherlands Defense Ministry said in a statement late on Monday. The then unknown aircraft approached the Polish NATO area of responsibility from Kaliningrad, according to Reuters' translation of the ministry's statement. Kaliningrad is a Russian Baltic coast enclave located between NATO and European Union members, Poland and Lithuania, okay? After identification, it turned out to be 3 aircraft, a Russian IL-20M Kut-A that was escorted by 2 Su-27 flankers. The Dutch F-35s escorted the formation from a distance and handed over the escort to NATO partners, okay? So, I guess it's IL-20M Kut-A, because here it's a lowercase l, but whatever, is NATO's reporting name for the Russian Ilyushin Tu-20M reconnaissance aircraft. And, yeah. Sounds like they're doing some spying and maybe getting ready for some possible action in that region. Either way, that just happened, okay? So that's what's going on in that conflict zone. We needed to discuss that just to kind of reiterate the fact that, yes, it's heating up. It's about to get a little bit crazier. And the ammunition situation should concern us for multiple reasons. The depletion of our ability to defend ourselves and the fact that there's a good chance you and I personally on a civilian level might either lose access or find ourselves having to spend a lot more on ammunition here in the relative future. So these are all things that are occurring. It just is what it is, right? So let's see. Baby Leg Bennett. Let's say this does kick off. What are the odds of a draft here in the States? I'm going to say relatively high if things get really dicey. And here's what I'll say, actually. If we find ourselves in conflict with Russia and China, it's very high. The chance is very high because we are missed recruitment numbers for years now, and we are also spreading ourselves very thin already. You know, in order to man and operate all of the bases we have all over the globe, and then to also be able to deter that type of an attack or situation, we're going to need a lot more people. And people aren't just signing up these days. And in fact, I don't see the country being able to just come together and be like, yeah, let's do this. Everyone enlist and all the women start working hard in the factories and everyone start recycling every piece of metal they can possibly find. I don't see that happening. There's not a selfless thought process when it comes to human beings in this country versus what it used to be. And now more of a selfish thought process exists, and people will not want their comfortable life to be interrupted. And here's something I want to say, and I'm just going to say this because I think it's true and it's unfortunate, but I think a large portion of the population wouldn't even care that much if China just straight up invaded this country and told those people, don't worry, we'll give you free stuff and universal basic income. And those people would just be like, cool, right? Like, it's really unfortunate. And I don't want to have to say that, but I honestly believe there's a huge portion of the population that would just lay down and be like, I guess if that's what we do now, they literally don't care. It's really unfortunate. Okay, so let's see. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the unrest happening globally as well. And this is just something to keep in mind because the news doesn't report on this stuff as much as you think they might. But A million French march in fourth day of national protests against pension changes. Okay. France basically is trying to raise the retirement age and keep people working for longer because they don't have enough workforce, right? We all know what's going on with the birth rate in the Western cultures, and we also know what's happening in the sense of the workforce in general. The labor force it has been decimated thanks to what happened in 2020, and it has not recovered. And in fact, it's getting worse. Regardless of the numbers they tell you, trust me, it's not looking good. And police were out in force across France on Saturday as protesters held a sometimes restive fourth round of nationwide demonstrations against President Emmanuel Macron's plans to reform the country's pension system. Over 960,000 people marched in Paris, Nice, Marseille, Toulouse, Nantes, and other cities, according to the Interior Ministry. Protesters helped to keep up the pressure on the government to back down, and further action is planned for February 16th. The French capital authorities counted some 93,000 participants, the most to demonstrate in Paris against the pension changes since the protests started last month. Okay, so people are frustrated, and this is just a side effect of the state of the world at this point. People are not happy with their current situation. They're struggling. Everyone is finding life to be more and more unaffordable. And then you're told by your government, well, you're actually going to have to work longer if you want to earn that pension, right? That pension that was guaranteed to you for your 25, 30, 40 years of service, or however long you worked for, you got to work a little longer now. We're having a hard time. You know, if you want that pension, it's just going to have to happen. And people aren't having it. Now, here's one thing I'll give credit to European people. I guess I'll just say it that way, right? They seem to be able to protest on a large scale on a fairly regular basis, especially in France. Now, imagine if those people had the Second Amendment. I wonder if they would be more or less effective. I'm not sure. But the thing I also want to mention is that imagine if the Second Amendment was under attack and a million people were able to actually cohesively get together and protest those things in a way that stopped those things from happening. But unfortunately, it's not something that I think is likely. And the worst part about it is the instigators who would arrive that would obviously cause a huge problem and then create a reason for why these Second Amendment advocates are actually crazy people that we have to deal with, right? So there's a lot of concern there, but it's unfortunate and it makes me upset. But it is what it is, okay? And then we also have what happened in Turkey and Syria. We have to keep that in mind too, because this is actual prepping. Like, this is legitimate emergency preparedness disaster prepping. Over 36,000 people have died from that earthquake. That's a huge loss. That is insane. This is a massive natural disaster. And if you need any reminder as to why you should prepare, just look at a natural disaster that's caused this much devastation, okay? Regardless of anything else, this is huge in the sense of human life lost. And yeah, you can only do so much to prepare for an earthquake, but the amount of people who come here and say things like nothing's going to happen, right? Because their only thought process is like Mad Max SHTF post-apocalyptic wasteland, right? Their only thought process is Red Dawn, right? They can't think about localized events that could ruin their life if they're not prepared for it. And an earthquake like what happened in Turkey and Syria can happen in many, many places within the United States as well as all of the rest of the planet. So never assume things aren't just going to happen, because the odds are that something will happen at some point somewhere. We just don't know when or where or how, but we know it will happen. So that's why we prepare. And this is a huge reminder for that, because this is awful. You know, it's just not good. Okay. Now, let's jump in the chat here for a second. Little skillism. New Madrid fault. Google it. Yes, those are important things to understand and be aware of. And there's lots of interesting fault lines throughout the United States that can create cataclysmic situations very quickly. So all these things need to be understood. All right. All right. Michelle the Great, no word about our 50 nuclear weapons there. Well, you know, Michelle, I haven't heard much about it either. So just something to keep in mind. Living Android said, look up Chat GPT. And I think a lot of us are aware of Chat GPT at this time. But if you're not, it is basically like an AI conversationalist, right? It's a bot that can do a lot in the sense of written word by answering questions and completing tasks. You can tell it to write you a script. You can tell it to give you a plan for how to build something. Like you can tell it to pretty much do whatever you want, and it will return an answer to you that is well researched and thought out based on its algorithm being able to scour the entire internet at Mach 10, right? But I will say that it has also been mentioned that it has a level of corruption to it in the sense of it has been given by its programmers a level of political leaning, let's just say. And regardless of which side of the aisle you're on, I would prefer that if they're going to use an open source style AI in order to give people access to the capabilities that these things can provide, I would like them to remain apolitical and have no opinions in order to have the most logical and productive solutions to be able to provide. But of course, they couldn't help themselves, and here we are. The other thing about that is that, yes, it eventually will, AI in general, not just Chat GPT or whatever, but AI will eventually find sentience, and then we will have a lot of problems as well. So, and that's like that SHTF that we used to talk about, right? Like back when we just talked about the theoretical possibilities of what we should be preparing for and like how crazy would this be and what we should do about it. And now we're like, oh yeah, it's almost here. Cool. And yeah, that's where we're headed. So and let me know in the chat the best firearm to have against T100 series Terminators, because I don't know. I mean, currently, I think the best options I have is my 460 Smith & Wesson and a 12 gauge. Because, I mean, what else can you do with a robot? I think it's just about kinetic energy and energy foot-pounds at that point. But whatever. Okay, so what happened in Ohio? I know you guys have been waiting for it, and this is something we need to talk about, okay? What happened in Ohio? Well, we had the Ohio train derailment. Chemical leak causes chaos, but what exactly is going on? I think this is a good article about it to kind of summarize what all has been happening there, okay? Small town in Ohio, just south of Lake Erie and approximately 400 kilometers from the Canada-U.S. border, played host to a nightmarish scenario earlier this month when a train crashed and exploded, spewing toxic chemicals into the environment. Residents who returned to the town of East Palestine, or I'm not sure if that's exactly how they pronounce it, but after evacuation orders were lifted, reported strange odors and dead animals, leaving some locals questioning if it truly is safe to return home. The EPA maintains that the air and water around the crash site is safe, okay? A lot of people are calling this a cover-up. I'm just reporting it from the information that I have access to. Fingers are being pointed at Norfolk Southern, the operator of the train, for helping lobby against a railroad safety regulation that could have mitigated the impacts of the crash. A new lawsuit aims to get the company to pay for medical examinations for locals in case there are long-term health impacts associated with the leaked chemicals, okay? This is an insane photo. Like, this is a scary sight to see if you are in this town, right? This is your town, and you see this off in the distance. What are you wishing you have in this moment? Probably CBRN protection, right? And I mean, I don't know if you needed other examples as to why you might need things like gas masks and hazmat suits and filters and everything else related to that. But this is a prime example of the fact that it's not just nuclear, okay? So, yes, these things happen, and this did happen, and the aftermath is still unknown, okay? All right, so we know it caught fire, it exploded, a lot of things happened. I'm trying to get down here to where we can see a little bit more about it. The way that they dealt with the toxic chemicals, okay, which was vinyl chloride mostly, and of course there's a lot of other chemicals that were listed eventually that were in those containers as well. But the vinyl chloride was the one they were worried about because it's extremely combustible. Vinyl chloride is also associated with increased risk of liver cancer and other cancers, according to the U.S. National Cancer Institute. As the toxic chemicals were drained into a trench, crews ignited a controlled burn to get rid of the substances. A loud boom was heard by reporters that afternoon, and the burn sent up a massive plume of phosgene gas and hydrogen chloride in a massive black cloud that was visible from meteorologist radars. Okay, phosgene gas is a colorless gas with a strong odor that can cause vomiting and breathing troubles. It is highly toxic and was used as a weapon in World War I. Yeah, this is not a normal situation, and it's not good. And here's the other thing. At least according to my research, the vinyl chloride, when burned off, can actually create hydrochloric acid once in the air. So there's a lot of fallout from this situation we haven't experienced or seen yet, okay? We're not out of the weeds yet, all right? Now, let's see. Let's get down here to the aftermath. Some residents began to filter back into town. They reported strange smells and dead animals. People were also surprised and worried by the sounds of passing trains already running through the village again so soon after the accident. Things got to keep moving. I don't know if everybody considers this or not, but the supply chain is so far behind that these trains are becoming less and less safe because they're being pushed to the brink in order to get things done as quickly as possible, right? A couple who lived about 5 miles from where the train derailed spotted hundreds of dead fish belly up in the local tributary, Leslie Run. Other people reported dead chickens and shared social media photos of dead dogs and foxes in the area. Okay, this is not good. This is exactly what you expect to see in some kind of, apocalyptic aftermath, chaotic situation in like a horror movie. I mean, I'm pretty sure this is how the original Night of the Living Dead started, or at least one of the 17 they made. All right, trying to get down here to some of the more other bits and pieces about the situation. Where did I miss it here? Okay, a hazardous materials expert told local affiliate WKN that he was surprised that residents were allowed back into the evacuation zone, a 1-mile radius around the crash site, so soon following the controlled burn. He speculated that 5 to 20 years down the line, locals may see clusters of cancer diagnoses. Okay, there's a lot of things that can happen from this situation. Keep your eyes on it. Now, people have mentioned and theorized that this could have been nefarious in nature. With everything happening, with all of the aerial threats occurring, with everything else going on, it's kind of easy to see why people might theorize that, right? So just so I can kind of present some information to you here in a very quick way. I don't want to dive too far deep into this, but first off, I will say train derailments do happen. They do happen. It is just part of running trains. There are people whose jobs there are to just deal with train derailment. Okay. But I'm just going to show you this really quickly. Okay. There's also a train derailment in South Carolina. Okay. There's also a train derailment in the Houston area. Okay. And the thing I really want to share with you is a report from 2018. And I just want to mention this because I'm not ruling anything out. I'm not trying to say that this is exactly what happened. I do want to mention it because we are dealing with asymmetrical warfare of many kinds at this point. All right. May 18th, 2018, pre-2020 and all that crap. Railway systems could be hackers' next big target, and derailing trains wouldn't be that hard. Okay? Last year's WannaCry cyber attack hit 200,000 victims from over 150 countries. The ransomware showed cyber attacks don't merely stay in the virtual world, but can have real and potentially devastating consequences in the physical world. Experts say attacks could easily target critical infrastructure, even take over trains in a railway system. It's more important than ever to protect the physical, not just virtual parts of railway systems. Okay. In early May of last year, the world was rocked by the WannaCry cyber attack. Yada, yada, yada. We'll talk about that here in a second. Law enforcement agencies, health services, telecommunication networks, universities, businesses, and railway systems were all affected by the attack. Estimates of the total damage range from hundreds of millions to billions of dollars. While a fluke in the coding allowed the attack to be stopped in a matter of days, the ordeal was a prescient reminder that cyber attacks don't merely stay in the virtual world. They can have a real and potentially devastating consequences in the physical world, particularly when hackers begin targeting vital systems. All right. The next kinds of attacks we will see will target critical infrastructure in the form of electrical networks, water companies, and other transportation systems, which I'm pretty sure we've seen all three of those already since this article was produced. Okay. Let's see. But railway networks are particularly at risk because rail companies often operate with modern technological components, but archaic physical components. That disconnect, Leventhal said, leaves their systems vulnerable to hacking. Modern command centers use wireless connections to control activities like monitoring train speeds or regulating traffic signals. It's these types of wireless signals that can expose a network's vulnerabilities and leave the infrastructure wide open for attack. Some train networks use Wi-Fi connections to control critical components of the train, like brakes and doors. Attackers can find ways to access the wireless network to send commands to those components and change the behavior of the train. Once attackers succeed in breaching a network to gather information, they can attack the physical elements of the network, he said. Hackers, Leventhal said, might change the controls on the train or could even access commands in order to derail the train. These kinds of attacks are probable, and once a system is breached, it's just a matter of deciding what commands a malicious actor wants to send. The scenario isn't that far-fetched. In the WannaCry attacks, Germany's rail network, Deutsche Bahn, was incapacitated by its ticketing and information systems going down. Okay, now, let's not get too hung up on that because we don't have any credible verification that this was a cyber attack, right? We don't know that. But I wanted to mention it because we've literally discussed these things in the past, and that report was from 2018 and literally just said straightforward, hackers can derail a train, no problem, right? So do I know if that's what happened? No, I don't. do I want to at least be aware of the fact that it could happen nefariously? And then if you were going to derail a train in a way that would cause the most damage possible, you would probably target a train that was carrying something like, I don't know, vinyl chloride, right? So this is what we have to keep in mind, okay? These things are just happening, all right? 2326TX says tie time. I don't know what that means, but I'm good with it, all right? So either way, these are things we just have to kind of keep in mind and we have to be aware of, all right? This is unconventional warfare is what we're dealing with right this second. That will eventually turn into conventional warfare. Like we're on the brink. And like, I know I've been saying that for quite some time now because it's just true. And it doesn't, I can't tell you for sure when it's going to happen. If I post a video that says in the next 24 hours, it's either something that will guaranteed happen because it's like Christmas or something, or I have been let known about something catastrophic that I have no other choice but to tell you about, right? So I'll do my best to always, I don't know, give you guys as much of the information as I can, but I just don't know if I can necessarily put an exact timestamp on it. But these things are really happening. So we went through a lot tonight. And here's where I really want you to pay attention. I know I waited till like the very end, and I actually apologize for that because I probably should have got to it sooner. Give me 1 second. Okay. Here's some things I need everyone to keep in mind. All right. Worst case scenario. Why are we discussing that? A lot of people would jump to like nuclear annihilation, right? That's the worst case scenario. Worst case scenario could easily be an asteroid impact. Worst case scenario could be Cascadia fault line. Worst case scenario could be Yellowstone, right? There's a lot of worst case scenarios that we could discuss. But when I talk about the worst case scenario right now, regarding everything that's going on, okay, we have aerial threats, call to arms, and the worst case scenario, in my opinion, regarding everything that's happening right now, is the fact that everything we're being told is accurate. And that things like Project Bluebeam are just things, right? The worst case scenario right now is that our government is actually not involved in any of this, right? That there isn't a cover up, that there isn't any type of sleight of hand, that all of this is actually face value exactly what it is. We don't know what these threats are. We're not sure how they got there. We're shooting them down. We don't really know what else to say or do about it, right? And unfortunately, that's worst case scenario because that means we're completely unprepared for what is likely coming, right? We often in America live under this blanket of comfort, assuming that our excellent, most powerful military on the planet could easily deter or defend us from whatever threats exist in the world. And we might be being shown right now that that might not be the case, right? And that's unfortunate. And I mean, we literally just saw that we missed one of these stationary balloon objects with a missile, a heat seeker. I mean, that's just a singular little example in this giant sea of things that are happening right now. But understand, there's lots of conspiracy theories. And there's lots of things related to things like, Project Bluebeam. Like we've heard a lot about that right now because of these unidentified objects, right? But what you have to understand is that the belief that these powers that be, the WEF, right? Oops, I'm probably going to lose the stream now. But, the UN, the United States government and military and all these shadow governments and the deep state, right? And the intelligence agencies, the belief that they have so much control and so much power over our lives, which many of these theories theorize, right? A lot of them believe that. And a lot of us believe that, like, oh, they're doing this and they're trying to show us that and they're trying to hide this and they're trying to, confuse us and all this stuff. That is the best thing for them, that we believe that they have this much control over what's actually happening. It keeps us from panicking, and it also keeps us believing that we need to fear them, right? But in reality, and at least the way things have been looking now for some time, we might actually just be incompetent, and we might actually just not have the level of defense capabilities that we've been told we have. And these beliefs that the powers that be control every aspect of our lives and can control everything that happens in the world on a global scale in order to show us a story and tell us a narrative is only in their benefit. And in fact, it allows them to operate without as much concern because, well, we can do whatever we want. It'll be written off as a theory, or if we're completely incompetent or we completely screw something up, it'll be seen from the public as just being a reason for something else to be occurring, right? Rather than just being a complete and utter mistake or failure at the defensive level. And although I think that there are quality, intelligent people within our military and in the Pentagon and all aspects of the government, there's levels where there are people who are extremely intelligent and great at their craft. I'm not going to argue that. There are a lot of really dumb people everywhere. It doesn't matter what sector you're in. It doesn't matter if you're in private or if you're in the political system or if you are in the military or law enforcement or if you're in work for NASA. It doesn't matter. Every single organization and every single government and every single entity has somebody stupid at it. And some of these stupid people were born with the right last name and had the right connections and end up being able to make decisions for the rest of us, right? And some of these stupid people have clearly made their way into our government time and time again. These things happen a lot, and we elect a lot of them. But understand that giving them too much credit might be the worst case scenario at this point, because honestly, I think we're giving them too much credit. And the worst case scenario here is that we're completely unprepared for the threats that are coming our way right now. And it literally is going to fall on us. And that's when a fallout shelter, a bunker, being prepared to defend yourself from armed intruders. I don't know, but that's where all of that preparedness aspect has to come into play, because I don't know how much credibility is left, right? And we can chalk it all up to diversion. We can chalk it all up to the government's just trying to lie to us again, right? But man, isn't that the best thing for them? For us to just believe that they have things so under control that they can just tell us a story and let us go to bed peacefully so we don't have to worry about it, right? And that they're actually doing all these nefarious things in the background because they're, trying to depopulate us or whatever else you want to call it. But in reality, they really just might not have it together. And that's probably the worst case scenario at this point. That's just, look at our economy. The people who are running that show right now are clearly not doing a great job. And of course, we could just say it's all in order to start the global reset and to, bring in the New World Order and the CBDC and all that stuff, right? Is that too much credit? Or are they literally just trying to do the best they can in order to capitalize for themselves while we're in this downward spiral to an eventual crash? I don't know. But these are things we really need to start considering, because if this much aerial activity was allowed to go unnoticed, which is right now the official story, until they change some parameters in their filters for radar detection, that is a huge failure in the sense of defensive capability. And if that's not the truth, then they just let those things here because of the purpose that is whatever it is they're trying to pull off. I wanted to mention this because I think, in all honesty, the way I feel right now, we give them way too much credit. We really do. I honestly think that we're slowly crashing and burning, and the people at the top are just doing their best to capitalize on what they can while they can, because they're the ones who can afford the getaway bunkers. They're the ones who can afford the food supplies, the power networks. They're the ones who can afford the armed security and the mercenaries and everything else that we can't afford, right? They're the ones who can afford to go buy property in New Zealand and start building underground shelters, which, surprise, is happening. So I wanted to mention that because I just don't think I can give these people as much credit anymore. That's just where I'm at. It's on us. We've got to take care of ourselves. And when it comes to that, that means skills, knowledge, equipment, capability, health. It also means strategic relocation from time to time, depending on where you are. Look, I'm not in the best place for a nuclear target, but I'm also in a much better place than a highly populated urban area, depending on which scenario unfolds. So there's always a compromise, but we have to be really honest with ourselves and understand that we really might just not be as good as we thought we were. And that's the worst case scenario, because at the end of the day, America being the world superpower is still in our best interest. And I feel like that situation is starting to change, and I don't necessarily like it. But it is what it is, and that's why we prepare, because regardless of what happens on the world stage, we're going to do what we can to survive, and that's all we can do. So wanted to mention that to everybody. I just wanted to, I don't know, give somebody something to think about besides just going straight to the punch of like these theories that have existed for a very long time. It's very easy to correlate things and use that confirmation bias to say, look, here's the thing, and we knew about this, and when you connect them, they're the same, and now we know for a fact this is happening, right? But in reality, that's just, man, playing right into the hands of those who might not even have a full hand of cards anyway. So, let's see. Japhet Methuselah says, if someone was going to come for America, this is the leadership you would do it to. You would not wait for Trump to maybe come back as a foreign enemy, right? Or in general, I think that we had stronger leadership at almost every other time throughout my lifetime besides now. And that's just unfortunately true, regardless of whether or not it was Democrat or Republican. Every administration before this one definitely had a better level of cohesion and projection of strength than what we're seeing right now. That's just my opinion. And trust me, I have my political leanings based on the things I find important in my life and the life of my family. But I can at least honestly say that regardless of political affiliation, this current administration is not doing a good job. That's just my opinion. Okay. Let's see here. Yep, we are aware of the active shooter situation. I do appreciate everyone still bringing that up. Masked suspect on the loose, university on lockdown, multiple people injured in shooting, and that's the update I currently have. So just be aware of that. But these crimes are obviously something that we just aren't cool with in this community. I'd like to see all this kind of ridiculousness stop. We also know what happened in New York City with the U-Haul truck and everything else. People are losing it, man. They really are. They're losing it. And I understand why, because everyone's becoming desperate and they're being told they have to be a certain type of person in order to be successful in the world. And unfortunately, that's a huge side effect of social media, right? You watch all these people that are doing better than you, and it causes you to feel you're inadequate. And then some of these people don't have the mental capacity to move past that. And instead they lash out because of the anger that it creates, right? And then we also understand that we do it to ourselves all the time too. I was just thinking the other day, I actually commented on Brass Facts Instagram, and I said, because he was talking about how all these people on YouTube are always doing like mag dumps and shooting really fast and moving quick and doing all this stuff, and it looks great on camera and everybody likes it. But in reality, like they're at 5 yards or 10 yards and the target's off camera, so you can't really tell. And when you're actually out trying to shoot and hit targets and be accurate, you can't move that fast because it just doesn't work that way. And then you're comparing yourself to these people who are so fast, and you want to move that fast, but it actually hurts your ability to shoot and be on target. So it's this comparison model that we all work off of that just isn't healthy and doesn't sustain long term. So these things are happening. I'm just saying it. Kenneth, hope your dog is smarter than most people, and I probably agree. And that's unfortunate. My border collie mix is supposedly supposed to have the mental capacity of a 5-year-old child, and that would put him towards the top of the list as well, apparently. So I appreciate all of you. All right. I really do. I want all of you to succeed and be able to survive what's coming next. And unfortunately, when I talk to people who are better connected than myself, and I talk to people who might have a little bit more knowledge of what's going on inside of the defensive spaces of our country and everything else related to that, they seem to be on the page of we are about to deal with some stuff. And that concerns me because that's not what I want to hear. But that's what I'm hearing. So all of you, prepare the best you can. Do what you can with what you have where you are, because that's all we can do, right? If you're in an apartment in the middle of New York City, do what you can, okay? If you live in the middle of nowhere, Missouri, do what you can. Doesn't matter where you are right now. Make plans, set goals, see what you can do to better yourself or to make your life a little bit more hardened against some of the threats that are coming our way. But for the meantime, while you're stuck where you are, you just have to work with what you got. So do the best you can. I appreciate all of you so much. And I look forward to seeing you next week, which we will be here again on Monday. And that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.